The escape pod screamed through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b like a falling star, its heat shields glowing cherry red as atmospheric friction tried to tear it apart. Inside, Marcus Chun gritted his teeth against the crushing deceleration, his augmented spine creaking under forces that would have liquefied an unmodified human. 23 years of military service, including tours in the Proxima Centauri conflict and the Vega System rebellion, had prepared him for many things. Crash landing on an uncharted world was not one of them. The pod struck the crystalline forest canopy with a thunderous crack, bouncing through branches that sparkled like diamonds before finally embedding itself in the soft, bioluminescent moss below. Emergency systems hissed as they vented toxic gases, and the pod's AI began its monotonous damage report in a voice growing steadily weaker as power cells failed. Marcus lay unconscious, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead, his breathing shallow but steady. His weathered hands, scarred from countless battles, still gripped his rifle even in unconsciousness. The servo motors in his prosthetic left arm sparked occasionally, damaged but not destroyed. Around him, the alien forest began to react to his presence, the bioluminescent moss shifting from blue to curious yellow-green. 50 meters away, beneath a natural shelter formed by the massive roots of a crystal tree, another drama was unfolding. Zara pressed her small, scaled snout against her mother's heaving flank, her young dragon heart breaking with each labored breath the ancient matriarch took. Silas the Wise, last of the true speakers, was dying. "Mama, please don't leave me," Zara whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystal trees chime softly in sympathy. At barely 50 years old, she was still a hatchling by dragon standards, her scales a brilliant emerald that would deepen to sapphire with age. Her wings, though still small, trembled with emotion as she watched her mother's life force ebb away. Silas had been magnificent once. Her scales had held the deep blue-black of space itself, shot through with veins of silver that seemed to hold captured starlight. She had been over 3,000 years old, a keeper of memories that stretched back to when her people had first achieved consciousness. But now those scales were dull and flaking, and the silver veins had turned an ugly, poisonous green. The plague had come without warning, a creeping sickness that attacked the neural pathways unique to dragons. It started as forgetfulness, progressed to loss of flight, and ended in madness and death. Silas had been the last to succumb, her ancient wisdom allowing her to fight longer than most. But even she could not hold out forever. "The memories, little star," Silas gasped, using her pet name for Zora. Her voice, once powerful enough to shatter mountains, was now barely a whisper. "When I die, they die with me. 10,000 years of dragon history, lost forever." Zara's tears fell like liquid diamonds onto the moss, which absorbed them and glowed brighter. She had heard this lament before, had watched 17 other dragons die while speaking the same desperate words. The plague didn't just kill dragons. It killed their culture, their history, everything that made them who they were. That was when the escape pod crashed. The sound was like thunder splitting the eternal twilight of the crystal forest. Zara's head snapped up, her enhanced senses immediately detecting something unprecedented. The scent was wrong, the electromagnetic signature unlike anything in her genetic memory. Most disturbing of all, she could sense a mind, alien and strange, but somehow familiar in its structure. "Mama, something's here," she said, her natural curiosity warring with her fear of leaving Silas alone. Silas lifted her great head with tremendous effort, her ancient eyes focusing with difficulty. "Go, little star. See what the universe has brought us in our darkest hour." Zara hesitated, then nuzzled her mother's snout gently before spreading her wings. She was still too young for true flight, but she could glide well enough. She leaped from the shelter and soared between the crystal trees, following her senses toward the impact site. What she found defied all her understanding of the universe. The creature was bipedal, which she expected from the ancient stories of the Star Wanderers. but it was so small, barely 2 meters tall, and appeared to be constructed of soft materials rather than proper scales or chitin. Its skin was a strange brown color, and patches of black fur grew from its head. Most bizarrely, it wore artificial coverings and was surrounded by incomprehensible technology. Zara landed softly near the crashed pod, her claws clicking against the crystalline debris scattered around the impact site. The creature was clearly alive. She could sense its thoughts even if she couldn't understand them. They were complex thoughts, layered and disciplined in a way that reminded her of her mother's mental structure. She approached carefully, extending her consciousness toward the alien mind. What she found there made her gasp. Pain. Vast, crushing emotional pain that made her own grief seem small by comparison. She saw flashes of images she couldn't comprehend. Other creatures like this one dying violently, mechanical constructs spitting fire, the darkness of space filled with the debris of war. But beneath the pain, she sensed something else. Determination. An iron will that had been forged in conflict and tempered by loss. Most importantly, she sensed knowledge. This creature knew things, had experienced things that might be exactly what her dying mother needed. Zara raced back to the shelter, her young mind spinning with possibilities she barely dared to hope for. "Mama, wake up," she called as she landed. "There's a star wanderer here, just like in the old stories. It's hurt, but it's alive and its mind. Mama, its mind is like yours. Strong, organized. Maybe it knows something that can help us." Silas's eyes cracked open, a flicker of interest cutting through the haze of her illness. "A star wanderer? Here? After so many millennia?" "Yes, Mama. And I think maybe this human will aid you." The ancient dragon considered this, her vast mind working despite the plague's ravages. In her 3,000 years, she had learned that the universe rarely provided coincidences. A star wanderer arriving at the moment of her species' extinction might not be chance at all. "Bring it here, little star," she whispered. "If this is to be our last hope, then we must seize it with both claws." Zara nodded eagerly and launched herself back into the crystal forest. Behind her, Silas closed her eyes and began to marshal what remained of her strength. She had survived the time of burning, the great silence, and the war of whispers. She would not let her species die without one final effort. In the crash site, Marcus Chun began to stir, his augmented physiology finally overcoming the trauma of the crash. His first conscious thought was to assess his tactical situation, a reflex burned into his mind by decades of warfare. His second thought, as his vision cleared and he saw the enormous green creature studying him with intelligent eyes, was that he might be in more trouble than even his considerable experience could handle. But as their eyes met across the alien landscape, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the understanding that they were both very far from home and very much alone. Zara tilted her head and spoke, her words somehow translating themselves directly into Marcus's consciousness through means he couldn't begin to understand. "Please," she said, and her mental voice carried the weight of desperate hope. "My mama is dying, and you're the only one who might be able to help." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, processing the impossibility of his situation. Then, because he was a soldier and soldiers adapt, he nodded slowly. "Lead the way, kid," he said, not knowing if she could understand him, but hoping the intent would translate. "Let's see what we can do." Marcus followed the young dragon through the crystal forest, his combat instincts screaming warnings that he steadfastly ignored. Everything about this situation violated basic survival protocols. Never follow an unknown alien into unknown terrain. Never approach what might be a nest or den. Never trust something that could clearly eat you in 2 bites. But the desperation in the creature's mental voice had been genuine, and Marcus had spent enough time in war zones to recognize a medical emergency when he saw one. The young dragon, whom he'd started thinking of as kid, moved with the careful urgency of someone trying not to panic. Her scales caught and reflected the ambient light of the forest, creating shifting patterns that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The trees around them were unlike anything in human experience. They grew in spiraling helixes, their crystalline bark transparent enough to reveal the flow of luminous sap within. The very air seemed to shimmer with suspended particles that glowed softly, giving the entire forest an ethereal quality. Marcus's augmented vision automatically adjusted to the conditions, cataloging potential cover positions and escape routes even as he marveled at the alien beauty surrounding him. "How much farther?" he asked, though he wasn't sure if the dragon could understand spoken language. The translation effect seemed to work in reverse, though, because she turned her head back toward him. "Close now," Zara replied directly into his mind. "Please, human, can you truly help her? I felt such pain in your thoughts, but also knowledge. Healing knowledge." Marcus grimaced. His thoughts apparently weren't as private as he'd assumed. "I'm not a doctor, kid. I'm a soldier. But soldiers learn field medicine. We have to, because sometimes help is a long way off." They crested a small rise, and Marcus got his first look at their destination. The shelter was formed by the massive roots of what must have been the largest tree in the forest, its base easily 100 meters in diameter. Bioluminescent vines hung from the root ceiling like organic fiber optic cables, providing gentle, steady illumination. And there, lying on a bed of soft moss, was the most magnificent creature Marcus had ever seen. Even dying, the adult dragon radiated an ancient majesty that made Marcus instinctively straighten his spine. She was easily 50 meters from snout to tail tip, her scales the deep blue-black of space itself. Silver veins traced patterns across her hide that seemed to pulse with their own internal rhythm, though Marcus noted with clinical concern that many of those veins had turned an unhealthy green color. Most impressive were her eyes. They opened as he approached, and Marcus found himself looking into depths that held intelligence so vast and ancient that it made him feel like a child. Those eyes had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, had watched stars be born and die. They held wisdom and sadness in equal measure. "So," the ancient dragon said, her mental voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Marcus's bones, "a star wanderer comes to us at the end of all things." How poetic! Marcus approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. Military protocol said to establish peaceful intent with unknown aliens, though the protocols had never covered a situation quite like this one. "My name is Marcus Chun, formerly Master Sergeant, Terra Defense Corps. The kid here says you're sick. Mind if I take a look?" A sound emerged from the dragon that might have been laughter, though it carried no humor. "The kid, as you call her, is Zara, last daughter of my line. And I am Silas the Wise, final keeper of dragon memory. I'm not merely sick, Marcus Chun. I am dying of a plague that has already claimed my entire species." The casual way she delivered this apocalyptic news hit Marcus harder than expected. He'd seen genocide before, had witnessed the aftermath of biological weapons and planetary sterilization. But there was something uniquely tragic about this quiet extinction happening in this beautiful, peaceful place. "What kind of plague?" he asked, shifting into his professional medic mindset. "Biological? Viral? Chemical contamination?" Zara answered from beside her mother, her young voice heavy with grief. "It attacks our neural pathways, the ones that store our ancestral memories. First we forget the old knowledge, then we lose our ability to communicate telepathically, then flight, then even basic motor functions. The green you see in Mama's veins, that's the sickness spreading." Marcus knelt beside the massive dragon head, noting details that his medical training flagged as significant. The breathing was labored, but regular, suggesting cardiovascular function wasn't completely compromised. The neurodegeneration Zara described sounded like it might be protein-based, possibly prion-related. "May I?" he asked, gesturing towards Silas. When she inclined her great head slightly, he placed his hands on her scales. They were warm, warmer than expected, and he could feel the power of her life force even diminished as it was. His augmented fingertips, equipped with basic biosensors, immediately began feeding him data. What they told him was both fascinating and horrifying. The dragon's neural structure was incredibly complex, far more so than any human brain. But more than that, it was designed to interface with some kind of external data storage system. The memories Zara had mentioned weren't just recollections. They were literal data packets passed down through generations and stored in specialized neural clusters. And those clusters were being systematically destroyed by what appeared to be a designer pathogen. "This isn't natural," Marcus said grimly. "Someone engineered this plague specifically to target your species' memory centers. This is a weapon." The silence that followed his words was deafening. Even the forest's ambient sounds seemed to fade as both dragons processed the implications. "Impossible," Silas whispered. "We have been alone on this world for 3,000 years. We have no enemies, no contact with other species." Marcus stood, his soldier's mind already working through tactical possibilities. "Then someone wanted to make sure you stayed isolated. Or someone wanted to steal your memories before killing you. Do you have any technology that might be valuable? Ancient knowledge that someone might want to suppress or steal?" Zara's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The archive? Mama, what if they're after the archive?" Silas struggled to lift her head, alarm cutting through her illness-induced lethargy. "The archive is sealed, protected by genetic locks that only true speakers can access. Even if someone could find it, they couldn't." She stopped, her ancient mind making connections that terrified her. "What's the archive?" Marcus demanded, his tactical instincts screaming that this was the key to everything. "The accumulated knowledge of our species," Silas explained weakly. 10,000 years of scientific advancement, philosophical insight, and technological achievement. We were space travelers once, Marcus Chun. We visited worlds beyond counting, learned from species your kind hasn't even discovered yet. All of that knowledge rests in the archive." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. "And the genetic locks require a living true speaker to access it. So if your species goes extinct, the knowledge dies with us," Zara finished, her voice small and frightened. "But if someone could keep one of us alive just long enough to open the archive," the implications were staggering. Someone had genocided an entire species to gain access to their technological archives. It was the kind of calculated evil that made Marcus's blood run cold, and he'd seen plenty of evil in his military career. But it also meant there was still hope. "How long do you have?" he asked Silas directly. The ancient dragon considered carefully. "Days, perhaps a week at most. The neural degradation is accelerating." Marcus nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He'd worked miracles with field medicine before, keeping wounded soldiers alive long enough to reach proper treatment. This was bigger than anything he'd ever attempted, but the principles were the same. "Right," he said, surprising both dragons with his sudden decisiveness. "First thing, I need to understand the pathogen better. Do you have any kind of medical technology here? Scanners, computers, anything that can give me detailed biological data?" Zara looked confused, but Silas's eyes brightened slightly. "The observation chamber, beneath the archive itself. But it requires telepathic interface to operate, and you lack the necessary neural architecture." Marcus grinned for the first time since the crash. "Kid, I think your mama just underestimated human adaptability. I've got some military hardware in my skull that might surprise her. Where's this archive?" As Zara began explaining the location of the hidden archive complex, Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with a dangerous mission. He'd volunteered for impossible odds before, had pulled victories from certain defeat through skill, determination, and sheer human stubbornness. This time, he wasn't just fighting for his own life or his unit's survival. He was fighting for the preservation of an entire species' legacy, and for a young dragon who'd asked him for help with such desperate hope in her voice. Marcus Chun had never backed down from a fight in his life. He wasn't about to start now. The journey to the archive took them deep beneath the crystal forest, through passages carved from living rock that pulsed with the same bioluminescent energy as the moss above. Marcus had improvised a support harness for Silas using cable from his escape pod, allowing Zara to help carry her mother's weight as they descended into the depths of the world. The ancient dragon's condition had worsened during the trip, her mental voice becoming intermittent and confused. Several times she called Zara by names that belonged to dragons dead for centuries, her vast memory beginning to collapse in on itself as the pathogen continued its relentless work. "How much farther?" Marcus asked, checking his chronometer. They'd been traveling for 6 hours, and he could see that Silas was reaching the end of her endurance. "There," Zara said, pointing ahead with her snout. "The archive entrance is just beyond that ridge." What Marcus saw when they crested the ridge made him stop in his tracks. The archive wasn't just a building or a bunker. It was an entire underground city, carved from crystal and metal that seemed to grow organically from the rock itself. Spiraling towers reached toward the cavern's ceiling, connected by bridges that defied gravity and logic alike. The entire complex glowed with soft, steady light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. "Your people built this?" Marcus asked, awed despite himself. 10,000 years ago, when we first achieved spaceflight," Silas whispered, her voice now barely audible even in their minds. "It was meant to preserve our knowledge for future generations. Instead, it may become our tomb." The main entrance was sealed by what appeared to be solid crystal, marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. As they approached, the symbols began to shift and change, responding to Silas's presence. The crystal barrier dissolved like mist, revealing a vast chamber filled with technology that made Marcus's military-grade equipment look primitive by comparison. The observation chamber sat at the heart of the complex, a sphere of perfect metal suspended in a web of energy conduits. As they entered, the sphere split open to reveal an interior lined with neural interface nodes and bioscanners that hummed to life automatically. "This should be able to analyze the pathogen at the molecular level," Silas explained, though the effort of speaking was clearly exhausting her. "But, as I said, it requires telepathic interface. Without the proper neural architecture, let me worry about that," Marcus interrupted, already examining the interface nodes. His augmented nervous system included military-grade neural implants designed to interface with alien technology, though they'd never been tested on anything quite like this. He selected what appeared to be the primary interface node, a crystalline structure that looked like it was designed for a dragon skull structure, and began modifying it with tools from his survival kit. The work was delicate, requiring him to essentially rebuild the interface to accommodate human neural patterns, but his military engineering training served him well. "This is incredibly dangerous," Silas warned as she watched him work. "If the interface isn't properly calibrated, it could burn out your neural pathways completely." Marcus grinned as he made the final adjustments. "Ma'am, I've been doing dangerous things professionally for 23 years. This is just another day at the office." The interface activated the moment his modified neural connector touched the crystal node. Marcus felt his consciousness expand suddenly, flowing out into the archive's vast information network. For a terrifying moment, he thought he might lose himself in the sheer immensity of it all. 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge pressed against his mind like a tide threatening to drown him. Then his military training kicked in, and he forced himself to focus on the specific task at hand. The archive's bioscanners came online under his direction, their sensors turning toward the dying dragon with microscopic precision. What they revealed made Marcus curse in 3 different languages. The pathogen wasn't just engineered, it was actively adapting. As they watched, it modified its attack patterns in response to Silas's natural immune responses, always staying one step ahead of her body's attempts to fight it off. Worse, it was designed with built-in safeguards to prevent external interference. "Someone's been refining this weapon for years," Marcus said grimly. "Maybe decades. They've studied your species' biology in incredible detail." "But who?" Zara demanded. "We've had no contact with anyone for so long." Marcus was about to answer when the archive's long-range sensors triggered an alarm. His consciousness, still linked to the system, immediately accessed the sensor data, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A ship was approaching the planet. not dragon-built, and definitely not human. Its design was angular, aggressive, built for war rather than exploration. And it was broadcasting on frequencies that the archive recognized as belonging to a species the dragons had encountered before. "The Devourers," Silas whispered, her ancient mind suddenly, sharp with terror despite her illness. "But they were destroyed millennia ago. We saw their empire fall." "Apparently not all of them," Marcus said, studying the approaching vessel through the archive sensors. "And I'm betting they're the ones behind your plague. They want your knowledge, but they want to be the only ones who have it." The ship would reach orbit in less than 4 hours. Once it arrived, any hope of saving the dragon species would be lost. Marcus made his decision with the same cold calculation that had kept him alive through dozens of impossible battles. "I can synthesize a treatment for the pathogen," he announced. "The archive's medical fabricators are more advanced than anything I've ever seen. But I need time, and I need you alive and conscious to help me navigate the knowledge base." "How much time?" Silas asked. "At least 6 hours for a proper treatment. Maybe 8 to be sure it'll work." Zara looked between them, her young mind grasping the mathematics of the situation. "But the ship will be here in 4 hours." Marcus nodded grimly. "Which means I need to buy us some time." He began disconnecting from the archive interface, his consciousness reluctantly withdrawing from the vast network. "I'm going to take my ship's weapons and give our uninvited guests a warm welcome." "Your ship crashed," Zara pointed out. "The weapons are probably destroyed." Marcus's grin was cold and predatory, the expression of a soldier who'd found his element at last. "Kid, you're forgetting something important about humans. We're very good at making weapons out of things that weren't originally weapons." He turned to Silas, his expression becoming serious. "I need you to hold on. Fight the pathogen however you can. Don't let it take your memories of the medical knowledge stored here. I'm going to need your help to synthesize the cure." The ancient dragon regarded him with eyes that held new respect. "You would risk your life for a species you met only hours ago." Marcus thought about it for a moment, considering the question honestly. "Ma'am, I've spent my entire adult life fighting for things I believed in. Freedom, justice, the right of people to live their lives without being murdered by those who think they know better. Your people aren't human, but that doesn't make them any less worth protecting." He paused, looking at Zara, who was watching him with an expression of desperate hope. "Besides, someone asked me for help. Where I come from, that means something." As Marcus prepared to leave for his desperate mission, Silas managed to lift her great head one final time. "Marcus Chun," she said, her mental voice carrying the weight of absolute sincerity. "If we survive this, Dragonkind will remember you until the last star burns out. You have my word as the final truth speaker." Marcus nodded respectfully, then turned to Zara. "Take care of your mama, kid. I'll be back as soon as I can." The young dragon watched him disappear into the crystal passages, heading back toward his crashed ship and the improvised battle that would determine whether her species lived or died. For the first time since her mother had fallen ill, Zara felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Above them, unseen and undetected, the Devourer ship continued its approach, its crew confident that they were about to claim the greatest prize in the galaxy. They had no idea that a single human soldier was about to remind the universe why his species had earned a reputation as the most dangerous warriors in known space. Marcus Chun was going to war, and he was taking no prisoners. Marcus reached his crashed escape pod as the Devourer ship entered the outer atmosphere, its angular hull glowing with the heat of atmospheric entry. Through his enhanced vision, he could see the vessel clearly now, and what he saw confirmed his worst fears. The ship was massive, easily the size of a human battlecruiser, and it bristled with weapons that could level mountains. But Marcus hadn't survived 2 decades of warfare by being impressed by superior firepower. He'd learned long ago that the bigger they were, the more spectacular they looked when they fell. The escape pod's weapon systems were indeed destroyed, just as Zara had predicted. But the power core was still functional, and Marcus's military engineering training had taught him that any sufficiently energetic power source could be turned into a weapon with the right application of physics and desperation. Working with practiced efficiency, he began cannibalizing components from the pod's various systems. The gravity generator provided exotic matter containment fields. The fusion reactor could be rigged to go critical on command. The navigation arrays, quantum entanglement communicators, could be weaponized to create localized space-time distortions. It wasn't elegant, but then Marcus had never been much for elegant solutions. He preferred the direct approach. As he worked, his enhanced hearing picked up the sound of atmospheric displacement above. The Devourer's ship was descending toward the planet's surface, its massive bulk blotting out the light from the system's pale sun. Soon, he could hear the whine of energy weapons charging and the ominous hum of tractor beam projectors coming online. They were searching for the archive. Marcus activated his improvised weapon system and felt a grim satisfaction as the readings came back green. He had approximately one shot before the entire contraption would either explode spectacularly or collapse into a miniature black hole. Either way, it would certainly get their attention. The timing had to be perfect. He needed to draw the Devourers away from the archive long enough for the medical fabricators to synthesize a cure for the plague. That meant making himself the most attractive target on the planet. Marcus keyed his suit's communication system to broadcast on all frequencies, including the ones the archive had identified as Devourer military channels. "Attention, alien vessel," he said, putting all the authority and contempt he could muster into his voice. "This is Master Sergeant Marcus Chun, Terra Defense Corps. You are in violation of Galactic Convention 7 regarding the protection of endangered species. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came almost immediately, a harsh electronic voice that spoke perfect galactic standard. "Human vessel, you are ordered to surrender immediately. Resistance will be met with total destruction." Marcus laughed, the sound carrying clearly over the comm channel. "You want me? Come and take me." The Devourer's ship responded by redirecting its flight path toward the crash site, exactly as Marcus had hoped. As it approached, he got his first clear look at the species that had nearly exterminated the dragons. The Devourers were appropriately named. They looked like walking nightmares, all chitinous armor and razor-sharp appendages. Their ship's hull was scarred with the symbols of conquered civilizations, trophies of genocide collected over millennia. These were the ultimate scavengers, feeding on the death of entire species and growing stronger with each extinction they caused. Marcus felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He'd fought against human monsters before, but this was different. This was evil in its purest form, the desire to destroy for the sake of destroying. The ship settled into a hover pattern directly above his position, its weapon arrays tracking down toward his improvised fortification among the crystal trees. Energy projectors charged with building lines, preparing to reduce the entire area to molten slag. Marcus waited until the last possible second, then triggered his improvised weapon. The effect was spectacular. The exotic matter containment field collapsed in a controlled cascade, creating a localized gravity well that pulled the Devourer's ship down while simultaneously releasing the energy of small sun in a directed beam. The combination of gravitational distortion and coherent energy punched through the ship's shields like they were made of paper. The vessel lurched sideways, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches as its crew fought to regain control. Alarms blared across the comm channels as damage reports flooded their systems. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to hope that one shot might be enough. Then, the ship's secondary systems came online, and he realized he'd only succeeded in making them angry. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams carved through the crystal forest like chainsaws through tissue paper, turning ancient trees into clouds of superheated vapor. The ground beneath Marcus's feet bucked and heaved as kinetic projectiles struck with the force of tactical nukes. Marcus ran, using every bit of his enhanced reflexes and battlefield awareness to stay ahead of the destruction. The Devourers were systematic in their assault, methodically destroying everything within a kilometer radius of the crash site. They weren't just trying to kill him. They were trying to erase every trace that he'd ever existed. But they were also following him exactly as he planned. Marcus led them on a running battle through the crystal forest, always staying just ahead of their weapons while drawing them farther and farther from the archive. His suit's power reserves were draining rapidly under the strain of constant evasive maneuvers, and he could feel the accumulated stress beginning to tell on his augmented systems. Then his luck ran out. A near miss from an energy beam sent him tumbling into a crystalline ravine, his suit's servos sparking as they overloaded. He tried to rise and felt his left knee buckle, the joint servos completely fried. Blood ran down his face from a dozen small cuts caused by crystal shards, and his vision was starting to blur from exhaustion. The Devourer's ship settled above the ravine, its weapon arrays trained on his position. A tractor beam locked onto him, lifting him slowly toward the ship's belly hangar. As he rose, Marcus could see armed figures waiting for him inside, their weapons ready and their intentions clear. That was when Zara arrived. The young dragon came out of the forest canopy like a green lightning bolt, her small form moving with incredible speed and precision. She struck the Devourer ship's port weapon array with the force of a guided missile, her claws ripping through armor plating that had withstood Marcus's improvised weapon. The ship lurched, its tractor beam flickering and dropping Marcus back into the ravine. Zara spun in midair with impossible grace, avoiding the defensive fire from the ship's point defense systems, then struck again at a different section of hull. "What are you doing here?" Marcus called out as she landed beside him. "I told you to stay with your mother." "Mama sent me," Zara replied, her young voice tight with determination. "The cure is synthesized, but she needs to administer it personally. She can't leave the archive, so we have to bring the fight to an end here and now." Marcus looked up at the damaged, but still functional Devourer ship and shook his head. "Kid, I appreciate the help, but that thing has enough firepower to level a city. We can't fight it toe-to-toe." Zara's eyes blazed with an inner fire that reminded Marcus powerfully of her mother. "We don't have to fight it," she said. "We just have to ground it." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Zara spread her wings and launched herself skyward again. But this time, instead of attacking the ship, she began flying in a complex pattern around it, her movements creating disturbances in a local electromagnetic field that made the crystal trees begin to resonate. The forest itself was responding to her call. The crystal trees started to sing, their harmonic frequencies building on each other in a crescendo that made the very air vibrate. Marcus felt it in his bones, a deep thrumming that seemed to reach down to the quantum level of reality itself. The Devourer ship's systems began to malfunction as the harmonic resonance interfered with their quantum processors. Navigation systems failed first, then communications, then finally the gravitic drives that kept the massive vessel aloft. The ship came down hard, crushing several acres of crystal forest as it embedded itself in the resilient ground. Emergency klaxons wailed from within its hull as the crew struggled to restore power and control. Zara landed beside Marcus, breathing hard from the effort of orchestrating such a complex harmonic pattern. "The forest remembers the old songs," she explained. "Mama taught them to me when I was very small." Marcus stared at her with new respect. "Remind me never to underestimate dragon technology," he said. "Now what do we do with our uninvited guests?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Silas's mental voice, stronger and clearer than it had been in days, touched both their minds simultaneously. "Now, my friends, we finished this. The cure is working, and I remember everything my people ever knew about dealing with Devourers. It's time to remind them why they feared dragons long before they learned to hate them." Marcus felt a grin spread across his face as he realized what the ancient dragon was implying. The Devourers had come here expecting to find a dying species and easy prey. Instead, they were about to rediscover why dragons had once ruled the spaceways and why humans have become the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The final battle was about to begin. The Devourer's ship's emergency airlocks hissed open like the mouths of hungry beasts, disgorging armed warriors onto the crystal forest floor. Marcus counted at least 30 of them, each one a nightmare of chitinous armor and biomechanical weapons designed for maximum lethality. They moved with the coordinated precision of professional killers, spreading out to establish a perimeter around their downed vessel. Marcus checked his remaining ammunition and weapons systems. 2 energy cells for his rifle, maybe a dozen rounds for his sidearm, and whatever improvised explosives he could cobble together from his suit's remaining systems. Against 30 heavily armed aliens with military-grade equipment, it should have been hopeless. Should have been. Zara, he said quietly, can you reach your mother from here? The young dragon closed her eyes briefly, her consciousness stretching out toward the distant archive. Yes, but barely. The distance makes it difficult to maintain clear contact. Ask her about Devourer tactical doctrine. I need to know how they fight, what their weaknesses are. As Zara communicated with her mother, Marcus studied their enemies more carefully. The Devourers were setting up what looked like a standard search and destroy pattern, but something about their formation bothered him. They were moving too cautiously, staying too close to their ship for a species that supposedly specialized in overwhelming force. Then, Silas's voice touched his mind directly, strong and clear despite the distance. The cure had worked better than anyone had dared hope, restoring not just her health, but access to the vast stores of knowledge locked away in her genetic memory. Marcus Chun, she said, her mental voice carrying undertones of ancient authority. The Devourers you face are not the warriors of old. They are scavengers, descendants of refugees who survived the fall of their empire by hiding in the darkness between stars. They have forgotten the arts of war, knowing only how to prey upon the weak and dying. So they're not as tough as they look. Their technology is formidable, but their spirits are brittle. They have grown accustomed to easy victories against helpless opponents. Show them true resistance, and they will break like glass before steel. Marcus felt a predatory grin spread across his face. He'd faced demoralized enemies before, troops who were dangerous only as long as everything went according to plan. The moment things started going wrong, they tended to fall apart. Time to make things go very wrong indeed. The first part of his plan was simple misdirection. Marcus began moving through the crystal forest, using his remaining ammunition to create the impression of multiple human soldiers conducting a coordinated defense. A shot from here, an explosion from there, always followed by rapid movement to a new position. The Devourers responded exactly as he'd hoped, spreading their forces thinner to counter what they perceived as a larger threat. Meanwhile, Zara was implementing her part of the strategy. Moving through the upper canopy with draconic grace, she began systematically destroying the Devourer's communication equipment with precisely targeted strikes. Her claws, harder than diamond and sharper than any blade, made short work of antenna arrays and transmission nodes. The effect on the enemy formation was immediate and dramatic. Cut off from their command structure and unable to coordinate effectively, the Devourer squads began making increasingly erratic decisions. Some charged forward recklessly, pursuing phantom contacts deeper into the forest. Others fell back toward their ship, creating gaps in their perimeter that Marcus was quick to exploit. The real turning point came when Silas herself arrived. Marcus felt her presence before he saw her, a weight of ancient power that made the very air around him thrum with suppressed energy. When she finally appeared through the crystal trees, he had to stop and stare in amazement. The cure hadn't just restored her health, it had returned her to her prime. The ancient dragon moved with fluid grace that belied her massive size, her scales now blazing with their original blue-black brilliance shot through with veins of pure silver. The green corruption of the plague was gone completely, erased as if it had never existed. But it was her eyes that truly commanded attention. They blazed with an inner fire that spoke of power beyond mortal comprehension, the accumulated wisdom and wrath of a species that had once ruled the stars. "Devourers," she said, her mental voice carrying to every corner of the battlefield. "You have made a grave error. You came here expecting to find carrion. Instead, you have awakened the last of the true speakers." The effect on the enemy forces was electric. Those old enough to remember the stories of the Dragon Empire's height froze in terror. Their weapons forgotten as ancestral fear overwhelmed their training. The younger ones, confused by their elders' reaction, hesitated at the worst possible moment. Silas didn't give them time to recover. The ancient dragon rose into the air on wings that blocked out the sun, her form terrible and magnificent against the crystal forest canopy. When she opened her mouth, what emerged wasn't the flame that human mythology associated with dragons, but something far more devastating. Pure coherent energy erupted from her throat, a beam of destruction that could have carved through a battleship's armor. It struck the Devourer vessel amidships, punching through its hull like tissue paper and setting off a chain reaction of explosions that lit up the forest like a second sun. The remaining Devourer warriors scattered in panic, their formation completely broken. Marcus picked off the stragglers with methodical precision, his enhanced reflexes and superior position allowing him to eliminate targets with minimal ammunition expenditure. Within minutes, it was over. The crystal forest fell silent, except for the crackling of fires burning within the wrecked Devourer ship. Marcus stood amid the alien carnage, his weapon lowered, breathing hard from exertion and adrenaline. Beside him, Zara looked around at the aftermath with wide eyes, still processing what they'd accomplished. "Is it finished?" she asked quietly. Silas settled to the ground near them, her massive form radiating satisfaction and grim purpose. "This ship is finished," she said, "but there will be others. The Devourers know now that the archive exists and that we have recovered our strength. They will return in greater numbers." Marcus nodded, already thinking tactically about the implications. "Then, we need to be ready for them. How long before word gets back to their main fleet?" "Months, perhaps a year, if we're fortunate," Silas replied. "Their communication networks are primitive compared to what they once were. But they will come, and when they do, it will be with everything they have." Marcus looked between the two dragons, these magnificent beings he'd helped save from extinction, and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Then, we'd better make sure they regret it," he said. "Your people had 10,000 years to accumulate knowledge and technology. My people have spent the last few centuries becoming very good at fighting impossible odds. Seems like a good combination to me." Silas regarded him with ancient eyes that held new respect and something that might have been affection. "You would stay with us? Help us rebuild." Marcus thought about his old life, the endless wars, and the military bureaucracy that had grown so tired. Then he looked at Zara, who was watching him with desperate hope, and at the crystal forest around them that represented so much beauty and knowledge worth preserving. "Ma'am," he said formally, "I respectfully request permission to extend my tour of duty indefinitely. This dragon's got my 6 now, and I don't abandon my wingmates." The sound Silas made might have been laughter, though it carried harmonics that made the crystal trees sing in response. "Marcus Chun," she said, "you are hereby granted the title of Honor Guard to the last archive, with all the privileges and responsibilities thereof. May your aim be true and your courage unwavering." Zara launched herself at Marcus in what might have been the first interspecies tackle hug in galactic history, nearly bowling him over despite his enhanced strength. "You're staying," she exclaimed. "You're really staying." Marcus steadied himself and grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kid. We've got a war to prepare for." As they made their way back toward the archive, Marcus began planning. They'd need fortifications, early warning systems, maybe even some of those dragon tech weapons if they could figure out how to manufacture them. The Devourers would return expecting easy prey and find instead the most dangerous combination in the galaxy: dragon wisdom and human warfare. Behind them, the wreckage of the Devourer ship continued to burn, a beacon visible even from orbit. It would serve as a warning to any other scavengers who might think to threaten this world. The dragons were no longer alone, and the stars would tremble before their combined might. The little dragon girl had been right. The human had aided them beyond anything she could have imagined. And, in return, Marcus Chun had found something he'd never expected: a family worth fighting for, and a home worth defending with his life. The war was coming, but they would be ready. Together, they were unstoppable.